My husband's family locked me out during Christmas dinner, laughing through the window as I stood freezing in the snow because his mother said I didn't deserve to eat with real family. I could see them all inside enjoying the meal I cooked for 8 hours, toasting and mocking me. So I went to my car, called the police about the domestic violence, then drove straight to a lawyer and filed for divorce on Christmas Day. When I came back with the sheriff to get my things, they were all crying because I'd already frozen their bank accounts and put a lien on the house I helped pay for. Well, let me tell you something that'll make your blood boil. My name is Evelyn Williams and I'm 32 years old. Last Christmas morning started like a fairy tale, but ended like a nightmare that changed my entire life. I woke up at 5 a.m. excited as a child. The snow was falling thick outside our 2-story colonial house, the one I'd been paying half the mortgage on for 3 years. My husband Ricardo was still snoring beside me, dead to the world as usual. I slipped downstairs to start what I thought would be the most beautiful Christmas dinner of my life. For 8 straight hours I cooked honey-glazed ham that cost me $200. Collard greens seasoned with smoked turkey necks. Mac and cheese made from scratch with 3 different cheeses. Sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow topping that Ricardo's sister Aria always raved about. Cornbread dressing with sage and celery. Green bean casserole. Cranberry sauce from actual cranberries, not that canned stuff. The kitchen smelled like heaven. Steam rose from every pot, and the oven timer kept singing its familiar song. I was wearing my new red dress, the one Ricardo had bought me for our anniversary, and I felt beautiful. Powerful even. This was going to be the Christmas that finally won over his family. See, they'd never accepted me. 3 years of marriage, and his mother Dorothy still introduced me as Ricardo's friend. His sister Aria would smile to my face, then whisper about how I trapped their precious baby boy. But today was different. Today I was going to show them what real family looked like. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 p.m., and I heard Ricardo jogging downstairs to greet them. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and prepared to host the perfect Christmas dinner. The first red flag should have been the way they walked into my house. Dorothy swept in like she owned the place, barely glancing at me as she handed Ricardo her coat. Behind her came his sister Aria with her husband Kevin, then his brother James with his girlfriend Stephanie. Not one of them acknowledged me standing right there in the doorway. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said, my voice bright and welcoming. "Dinner's almost ready." Dorothy finally looked at me, her eyes cold as the snow outside. "Oh, you're still here." "Still here? In my own damn house." But I swallowed the response burning in my throat and kept smiling. "Of course. I've been cooking all morning. Wait until you taste what I made." Aria sniffed the air dramatically. "Something smells interesting." The way she said interesting made my stomach clench, but I pushed forward. "Ricardo, honey, can you help me bring out the dishes?" My husband, the man who'd promised to love and protect me, was already settled on the couch next to his mother. "In a minute, babe. Mama's telling me about Uncle Jerome's surgery." So I carried out dish after dish by myself. The dining room table groaned under the weight of the feast I'd prepared. Golden ham glistening under the chandelier. Vegetables that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Everything perfect, everything made with love. But when I called them to dinner, they moved like they were walking to their own execution. Dorothy examined each dish with the scrutiny of a health inspector finding violations. She murmured, poking at the mac and cheese. "This looks different from how I make it." Different? I'd used aged cheddar, Gruyere, and Parmesan. I'd made a roux from scratch. This wasn't different. This was better. But I kept my mouth shut and my smile plastered on. We sat around the table and I watched as everyone loaded their plates. For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe the food would speak for itself. Maybe this perfect meal would finally show them I belonged here. Dorothy took a small bite of the ham and chewed slowly, her face unreadable. Then she set down her fork. "Well," she announced to the table, "it's certainly seasoned." The way she said it made seasoned sound like a disease. My face burned, but before I could respond, Aria chimed in. "Yeah, it's really bold. Very different from what we're used to." She exchanged a look with her mother that I caught immediately. They were talking about me being black. About my bold flavors being too much for their delicate palates. James cleared his throat. "The mac and cheese is interesting too. Very yellow." "That's the real cheese," I said quietly, my voice strained. "I used aged cheddar instead of Instead of the good cheese, Dorothy interrupted with a tight smile. How creative. Ricardo said nothing. My own husband sat there cutting his ham while his family systematically destroyed every dish I'd spent 8 hours preparing. When I looked at him desperately, he just shrugged. Maybe it is a little heavy on the seasoning, babe, he said, not meeting my eyes. The betrayal hit me like a slap. But the worst was yet to come. Halfway through the meal, Dorothy dabbed her mouth with her napkin and made an announcement that would haunt me forever. You know what? I'm suddenly not feeling well. I think I need some fresh air. One by one they started following her lead. Pushing back from the table. Making excuses. Abandoning the feast I'd poured my heart into like it was poison. Where is everyone going? I asked, panic creeping into my voice as they all stood up from the table. We haven't even had dessert yet. I made peach cobbler from scratch. Dorothy turned to face me, and for the first time all day her mask slipped completely. The cold politeness was gone, replaced by pure venom. Evelyn dear, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, I think it's time you learned something important about family. My heart started pounding. What do you mean? Real family doesn't have to try so hard, Arya said, standing beside her mother like a soldier in formation. Real family just fits. Ricardo was gathering their coats from the closet, still not looking at me. Ricardo. I called out. What's happening? Where are you going? He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke something inside me. Shame, but not for them, for me. He was ashamed of me, his wife. We're just going to get some air, Evelyn. Maybe take a walk around the neighborhood, look at Christmas lights. But it's freezing outside. And dinner. We'll be here when we get back, Dorothy interrupted. Don't worry about cleaning up. We'll handle everything when we return. They were putting on their coats now, wrapping scarves around their necks. I stood in my red dress, watching my husband's family prepare to abandon me on Christmas Day. I'll come with you, I said desperately. Just let me get my coat. No, Dorothy said firmly. This is family time. Real family time. And then they walked out. All of them. Including Ricardo. I stood in the empty house, surrounded by the ruins of my perfect Christmas dinner, listening to their voices fade down the street. That's when I heard the deadbolt turn. I ran to the front door and turned the handle. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. Ricardo. I called out, pressing my face against the cold glass. Ricardo, the door is locked. Through the window I could see them standing on the sidewalk. Arya was looking back at the house, and when she saw my face in the window she smiled. Not a warm smile, a cruel, victorious smile. I tried the back door. Locked. The side door leading to the garage. Locked. Every single exit from my own house had been secured from the outside. They had planned this. I pressed my palms against the living room window and watched in horror as they came back up the walkway. But they didn't come to let me in. Instead, they gathered on the front porch, stomping their feet and brushing snow off their coats. Ricardo. I screamed, pounding on the glass. Let me in. This is my house. He looked up at me through the window, and I saw something in his face that made my blood freeze. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was deliberate. Dorothy appeared beside him, her face glowing with satisfaction. She looked directly at me through the window and mouthed words that would echo in my mind forever. You don't deserve to eat with real family. Then, and I swear this image is burned into my retinas, she pulled out the house key. My house key, the one I'd given Ricardo when we first moved in together. She held it up to the window, dangling it like a trophy, and laughed. They all laughed. Standing on my porch in front of my house, they pointed at me through the window and laughed like I was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. The snow was falling harder now, and I could feel the cold seeping through the glass. I ran from window to window, desperately trying to get their attention, to make them see how cruel this was. But they ignored me completely. Instead, they filed back into the house through the front door. The door I couldn't open, and I heard the deadbolt slide home again. From the living room window, I watched them return to the dining room table. My dining room table set with MY dishes loaded with MY food. They sat down and continued eating like nothing had happened. Ricardo carved himself another slice of ham. Arya spooned more mac and cheese onto her plate. The same mac and cheese she'd criticized 20 minutes earlier. James was actually laughing at something Dorothy said while he buttered a piece of my cornbread. I stood outside in my red dress, no coat, no shoes except my thin Christmas slippers, watching them feast on the meal I'd spent 8 hours preparing. The meal they'd insulted and abandoned was suddenly good enough to finish without me. The temperature was dropping fast. My breath came out in visible puffs and my fingers were starting to go numb. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the ice forming in my chest. Dorothy raised her wine glass, wine from the bottle I'd bought, and made what was obviously a toast. They all laughed and clinked glasses, their faces warm and happy in the golden light of the chandelier. Then Arya pointed toward the window where I stood and they all turned to look at me. Dorothy raised her glass in my direction and took a long, deliberate sip. They were mocking me, celebrating their cruelty while I froze outside my own home. That's when something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a steel cable under too much pressure. I walked to my car. My hands were shaking so violently from cold and rage that I could barely get the car door open. I sat in the driver's seat, turned on the heat and just stared at my house. At the warm yellow lights glowing in every window. At the figures moving around inside, eating my food, drinking my wine, living in my space like I'd never existed. I pulled out my phone and called Ricardo. Through the dining room window I could see him look at his phone, see my name on the screen and deliberately decline the call. He declined me. His wife. While I sat freezing in my car on Christmas Day. I tried again. This time he didn't even look at the phone. He just kept eating. That's when I noticed something that made my blood pressure spike even higher. Dorothy had gotten up from the table and was now moving around my kitchen like she owned it. She was opening my cabinets, examining my dishes, rearranging things to suit her preferences. She was literally making herself at home in my home while I sat locked out in the cold. The rage that consumed me then was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger that makes you scream and throw things. This was cold, calculating fury that cleared my mind and sharpened my focus like a laser. I scrolled through my phone contacts until I found the number I needed. 911, what's your emergency? My voice was steady as granite. I need to report domestic violence. I'm being held against my will and denied access to my own home by my husband and his family. They've locked me out in freezing weather with no coat or proper shoes. Ma'am, are you in immediate physical danger? I looked at my hands, which were starting to turn blue. Yes. They've trapped me outside in below freezing temperatures. This is endangerment. Officers are on their way. Can you get somewhere warm while you wait? I'm in my car. But even as I gave the dispatcher my address, I was scrolling through my contacts for another number. While I waited for the police, I made another call that would change everything. Mitchell and Associates Law Firm, emergency line. This is Evelyn Williams. I need a divorce lawyer and I need one today. Ma'am, it's Christmas. I know exactly what day it is, I said, my voice sharp as winter air. That's why this is an emergency. My husband and his family just locked me out of my own house in freezing weather while they eat the Christmas dinner I spent 8 hours cooking. I'm sitting in my car right now waiting for the police to arrive. There was a pause. Are you safe? For now. But I need to know my rights immediately. I've been contributing to the mortgage on this house for 3 years, and I have documentation proving it. I also have access to our joint accounts. Ma'am, I can have someone meet you within the hour. Are you planning to file immediately? I looked through my windshield at the house where my husband was toasting with his family while I sat in exile. Yes. Today. Before the banks close for the holiday. We can make that happen. Our partner Rebecca Joyner specializes in emergency domestic cases. She's at the downtown office right now handling another Christmas crisis. Perfect. Text me the address. Just as I hung up, 2 police cars pulled into my driveway, their red and blue lights painting the snow in festive colors that felt nothing like Christmas. The first officer, a black woman about my age named Officer Ivory according to her badge, approached my car. Mrs. Williams? You called about domestic violence. Yes, ma'am. That's my house and those people inside locked me out in this weather. My husband is in there with his family eating the dinner I cooked, while I'm trapped out here without a coat. She looked at my thin dress and house slippers, then at the warm lights glowing in every window of the house. Do you have proof this is your residence? I handed her my driver's license showing the address, my house key and photos on my phone of me inside the house. I've lived here for 3 years and paid half the mortgage. Hey, let's go have a conversation with your husband. Officer Ivory knocked firmly on the front door. Through the window I watched chaos erupt inside. Ricardo jumped up from the table so fast he knocked over his wine glass. Dorothy's face went white as paper. Arya grabbed Kevin's arm like she needed support. Ricardo opened the door with a fake smile plastered across his face. "Officers. Is there a problem?" "Sir, we received a domestic violence call. Your wife says you've locked her out of her own home in dangerous weather conditions." "Locked her out?" Ricardo's voice climbed an octave. "That's ridiculous. She went outside for some air and the door accidentally locked behind her. We didn't even know she couldn't get back in." Officer Ivory looked at him like he'd just said the earth was flat. "So when she called your phone multiple times, you didn't answer because?" Ricardo's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Behind him, I could see Dorothy frantically whispering instructions to Arya. "Sir, we need to come inside and sort this out," the second officer said. "Mrs. Williams, please come with us." Walking back into my own house felt surreal. The dining room still showed evidence of their feast. My feast. Empty plates, wine glasses with lipstick stains, napkins crumpled on the table. The food I'd been denied was half gone. "Ma'am," Officer Ivory addressed Dorothy, "are you familiar with the domestic violence laws in this state?" "Domestic violence?" Dorothy's voice was shrill. "This is all a misunderstanding. We were just having a family dinner." "A family dinner that excluded the woman who cooked the meal and lives in this house," Officer Ivory said dryly. "After locking her outside in 20-degree weather." I spoke up for the first time since entering. "Officer, I have something else to report." While they were eating my food inside my house, they were pointing at me through the window and laughing. I have photos on my phone showing the window condensation where I was pressed against the glass trying to get their attention. Ricardo stepped forward. "Evelyn, honey, you're blowing this way out of proportion." "Don't." My voice cut through his words like a blade. "Don't you dare call me honey after what you just did." The second officer was taking notes. "Mrs. Williams, do you feel safe staying in this house tonight?" I looked around at the faces staring at me, Ricardo's desperate pleading, Dorothy's barely contained rage, Arya's obvious panic. "No," I said simply. "I don't. I'll be staying elsewhere tonight," I continued, "but I need to collect some personal items first. And I need these people out of my house while I do it." "Evelyn." Ricardo's voice cracked. "This is insane. They're my family. And I'm your wife," I snapped. "Or at least I was until you chose them over me today." Officer Ivory nodded. "Sir, I need you and your family to wait outside while Mrs. Williams collects her belongings. This is standard protocol in domestic disputes." "But it's freezing out there." Arya protested. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Officer Ivory didn't miss it either. "Ma'am, your sister-in-law just spent 30 minutes outside in this weather wearing only a dress because your family locked her out. I think you can handle a few minutes with coats on." While they reluctantly filed outside, I went upstairs to pack a bag. But first I had more phone calls to make. Rebecca Joyner, Mitchell and Associates. "Ms. Joyner, this is Evelyn Williams. We spoke earlier about emergency divorce proceedings." "Mrs. Williams, yes. I'm already preparing your paperwork. How soon can you get to my office?" "Within the hour. But I need to discuss asset protection first. My husband doesn't know I'm filing and I'm concerned about him trying to hide money or transfer assets." "Smart thinking. Do you have access to your joint accounts right now?" I pulled out my phone and checked our banking app. "Yes. We have about 40,000 in checking, 25,000 in savings, and he has a separate account with another 15,000 that I have access to through our shared login. Here's what you're going to do immediately before you leave that house." For the next 10 minutes, Rebecca walked me through steps that would protect everything I'd worked for. By the time I finished those phone calls, Ricardo and his family's comfortable little world was about to get very, very cold. I packed my bag, grabbed important documents from our home office, and headed downstairs where Officer Ivory was waiting. "Mrs. Williams will escort you off the property safely. Do you have somewhere secure to stay tonight?" "Yes, ma'am. And thank you. Both of you. You've been incredibly professional." As I walked to my car, I could hear Dorothy's voice rising hysterically on the front porch. "This is all just a big misunderstanding. She's being dramatic." I turned to look at them one last time, Ricardo, Dorothy, Arya, James, Kevin, and Stephanie, all huddled together against the cold they'd forced me to endure. "No," I called out clearly. "This is just the beginning." Rebecca Joyner's office was downtown in a glass tower that gleamed even on Christmas Day. She was a tiny woman with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. Exactly what I needed. Mrs. Williams, I've reviewed the information you provided over the phone. Your situation is actually more straightforward than many domestic cases because of your financial documentation. You've been paying into that house for 3 years. Half the mortgage plus I paid for most of the renovations. I have bank records for everything. Excellent. And the joint accounts? Already handled. I showed her my phone. I transferred my contributions to a new account at a different bank. Left his money untouched but protected mine. Rebecca smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen all day. Smart woman. Now your husband doesn't know you're filing. Not yet. I imagine he's still at the house with his family, probably thinking this will all blow over by tomorrow. It won't. I'm filing your petition today and we're requesting emergency protective orders. What they did constitutes domestic abuse, specifically, denying you access to your home and basic safety needs. She slid papers across the desk. I need you to read this carefully and sign where indicated. We're also filing for immediate asset freezing on any accounts your husband might try to drain once he realizes you're serious. As I signed document after document, Rebecca explained what would happen next. The sheriff will serve him tomorrow with divorce papers and temporary restraining orders. He'll be prohibited from harassing you, changing locks, or accessing the joint accounts. What about the house? Since you've been paying half the mortgage, you have equal claim. We're requesting the court grant you temporary exclusive use of the marital home, which means he'll need to find somewhere else to stay until this is resolved. I looked up from the papers. Seriously. He locked you out on Christmas Day, Mrs. Williams. Family court judges don't take kindly to that kind of behavior, especially when there's financial documentation showing your equal investment in the property. By the time I left Rebecca's office, it was dark outside. Christmas Day was almost over, but my new life was just beginning. I spent Christmas night in a hotel downtown, ordering room service and planning my next moves. By 8 a.m. I was dressed in my sharpest business suit, ready to reclaim my life. My phone had been buzzing all night with texts from Ricardo. Evelyn, come home so we can talk. My family didn't mean anything by it. You're being ridiculous. I'm sorry, okay? Just come back. I didn't respond to a single one. At 9 a.m. sharp my phone rang. Rebecca Joyner. Mrs. Williams, the sheriff's department just confirmed they're en route to serve your husband. Are you ready for the next phase? More than ready. Good. They're also serving notice that you'll be returning to collect additional belongings at noon with police escort. I recommend you bring everything you'll need for the foreseeable future. At 11:45 a.m., I pulled into my driveway followed by 2 police cars and a sheriff's deputy. The same house that had glowed so warmly yesterday while I froze outside now looked different. Smaller somehow. Less powerful. Ricardo's car was still in the driveway, along with Dorothy's sedan. They were home. Officer Ivory stepped out of the first police car. Mrs. Williams, you have 1 hour to collect your belongings. We'll ensure there's no interference. As we approached the front door, I could hear shouting inside. Ricardo's voice, high and panicked. How did this happen so fast? She can't just freeze our accounts. Dorothy's voice, shriller than ever. That ungrateful little. The sheriff knocked firmly. Police. Open up. When Ricardo opened the door, his face was a map of devastation. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair disheveled, his Christmas sweater wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Evelyn, thank God you're back. We need to fix this. My mother didn't mean. Step aside, sir, the deputy interrupted. Mrs. Williams is here to collect her belongings. As I walked into my house, soon to be my house alone, I could see Dorothy and Arya huddled in the living room, both clutching their phones and looking like their world had ended. Because it had. The sight that greeted me in the living room was everything I could have hoped for. Dorothy sat crumpled on the couch, mascara streaked down her cheeks, holding papers that I recognized immediately, the divorce petition and restraining orders. Evelyn, she said, her voice completely different from yesterday. Gone was the cold authority, the cruel superiority. Now she sounded desperate. We can work this out. We're family. No, I said calmly, walking past her toward the stairs. We're not family. You made that very clear yesterday when you told me I didn't deserve to eat with real family. Ricardo followed me upstairs, pleading. The accounts, Evelyn, you can't just freeze everything. I can't make the mortgage payment. I turned to face him at the top of the stairs. You should have thought about that before you locked me out of my own house on Christmas Day. It wasn't my idea. My mother. Your mother doesn't live here. Your mother doesn't pay the bills here. You chose her over me, Ricardo. You chose all of them over your wife. In the bedroom we'd shared for 3 years, I packed methodically. Clothes, jewelry, important documents, family photos. Everything that mattered to me. The lien on the house, Ricardo said quietly. Rebecca Joyner explained it to me. You can force the sale. I can. And I will if I have to. I folded my last sweater into the suitcase. You see, Ricardo, I've been paying for half of this house. Half the mortgage, half the utilities, half the renovations. But yesterday your family made it clear that I have zero claim to being part of this family. So now you get to choose, buy out my half of the house or we sell it and split everything 50-50. From downstairs I could hear Dorothy crying. Not the elegant tears of a woman who'd gotten her feelings hurt. These were the raw, ugly sobs of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. As I carried my last suitcase downstairs, she looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd spent 3 years making me feel like I wasn't good enough, who'd smiled while she crushed my heart yesterday. Dorothy, I said softly, yesterday you had the chance to be a decent human being. You had the chance to accept the meal I cooked with love, to welcome me into your family, to treat me with basic respect. Instead you chose cruelty. You chose to lock me out in the freezing cold while you laughed at me through my own window. I headed toward the door, then paused. Now you know how it feels to be left out in the cold. The difference is you'll have somewhere else to go. Yesterday you made sure I didn't. As I walked out the door of that house for the final time, I heard Ricardo call out desperately, Evelyn, please. I love you. I turned back one last time, looking at the man I'd thought I'd spend my life with. If you loved me, Ricardo, yesterday never would have happened. The police escort followed me to my new apartment across town. A place Dorothy would never set foot, where Ricardo's key wouldn't work, where I could cook Christmas dinner every year for people who actually wanted me there. As I unpacked my things in my new home, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca Joyner. Emergency hearing granted for next week. Judge reviewed the evidence and called their behavior unconscionable. You're going to be just fine. I looked out my new window at the snow still falling softly, and for the first time in years I felt warm all the way through. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. But justice? Justice is a dish best served immediately, while the evidence is fresh and the truth is undeniable. And sometimes the best Christmas gift you can give yourself is the gift of knowing your own worth. And never accepting anything less than you deserve. I keep going over this in my head, wondering if I was too harsh. What do you think? Was I justified or did I go too far?